Our speaker is Maribel Graf from the University of Tübingen, Germany. Today, she presents her talk on the topic, Emotional Practices in Polyamorous Relationships in Germany. Maribel Graf is a PhD candidate at the Ludwig Uhland Institute of Historical and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Tübingen, Germany. She studied cultural studies, cultural anthropology, and philosophy in Lüneburg and Tübingen. In her doctoral thesis, she uses ethnographic methods to research emotions, everyday life, and self-perceptions in polyamorous relationships in Germany. Today, she will give a talk on the topic, Emotional Practices in Polyamorous Relationships in Germany.
So yeah, I would like to start my presentation with two quotes from my interviewees. And the first one is from Amelia. And she told me, so there are a lot of movies and TV shows and I don't know what, books that are based on the plot. He is torn between two women or she is torn between two men and must make a decision. So it goes from the musical Starlight Express to Twilight to, I don't know, you name it. So there are an awful lot of stories like that. And actually, the person is in love with both people. And obviously, it works. So why is he now forced by someone or by, well, some people force themselves to decide, but somehow always this artificially grafted on thing, but you're not allowed to be like that. So it's like, it's a fact. It happens like that. People are like that, but you're not allowed to be like that. And I've always seen that as a rule that's been grafted on, yes, from the outside, and can therefore be criticized in the same way that all kinds of other rules are also called into question. So there are a lot of this is how it is, this is how it has to be done rules that have become outdated in the meantime. And the second one, the first time I had a picture like this in my head was in my early days in America. So I'm sitting here on the sofa with my boyfriend. Why can't the other person, who I also like, sit on the other side? And that was a very impressive image that I had for a whole evening while we were watching something on TV. Like, why isn't that possible? Why can't that happen? And that was actually my first consciously polyamorous moment. I then drew a little comic of me as a small child with two teddy bears in my arms, and I wrote, "Life used to be easy." So the first reaction that many of my interviews tell me about is that people say, I could never do that, I could never live that way, I would be too jealous, I don't want to share. And the Polyamorous Network Germany writes about this on one of its flyers. Jealousy does occur in polyamorous relationships, but is not as natural a feeling as is often claimed. If you explore your own jealousy, there's a lot to discover about yourself. What is the cause of this feeling in me? Possessiveness, fear of loss or abandonment, fear of comparison? Jealousy can be unlearned, and being happy for the other person makes you happy. But after growing up in a mononormative society, and by that I mean a society in which monogamous lifestyle is like the social norm, with mononormative laws, for example, family law, economics, belief systems, and so on, how can these socialized emotions and cultural feelings be unlearned? And how can other emotional reactions be developed instead? So these are a few questions from my PhD project that I would like to focus on today, which leads me to the following title: Unlearning Mononormativity and Exploring Love, Emotional Practices in Polyamorous Relationships in Germany. So I'm currently in the second year of my PhD project and in the middle of ethnographic data collection, while at the same time already analyzing my so far data to go back into the field with new insights. So today I would like to present my preliminary results. And to do this, we first need to define my field of research more precisely. So when I first heard about people deconstructing monogamy or identifying or seeing it as a social and cultural construct, I thought, well, if you live like the monogamous bubble, you have to enter the great wide open of undefined relationships and love without categories, right? Well, I couldn't have been more wrong, because people seem to love categories. Here you can see the so-called map of non-monogamy by the polyamorous writer Franklin Vo. So we're coming from here, cheating, and now in the next 9 minutes, we'll be at the top right here or here-ish. So yeah, as you can see, the categories also overlap and cannot be clearly separated from one another. And of course, social reality cannot always be squeezed into artificial categories, but we never tire of trying. So theoretically, what does poly even mean? The term polyamory comes from the Greek polis and Latin amor, which means love many. It's not the same as polygamy, which is illegal in Germany. In polyamory relationships, there's no religious justification, and there's also no man at the center. And the educational sociologist Burkhard Bierhoff describes or defines polyamorous loving as a practice that is not necessarily sexual, but initially emotional, a solid bond with more than one person that is linked to the feeling of love and its derivatives, whatever they may be. And it's also seen as a type of ethical, consensual non-monogamy, as we already heard from Simon. And yeah, you cannot talk about the polyamory or like polyamory in a universal way, because all needs and rules are negotiated individually in each relationship. And yeah, what to add about consensual non-monogamy, that means that everyone involved has to know about every other person and has to consciously, consensually agree on all relationships. The term also is used as a collective label to get together with like-minded people and as a self-designation. And it's also in the contrast to the 68 movement, which can see like just like a corset of middle-class values, that was discarded only to enter like a new corset. So next we're having a quick look on theoretical background on love out of my echo chamber. So having or doing emotions. In 2012, the cultural anthropologist Monique Scher further developed the terms emotion work and feeling rules by Ali Russell Hochschild, and sees or described romantic love in line with sociologist Eva Illouz as a cultural practice. And Monique Scher also describes emotions as learned, embodied, habitualized, and produced, perceived according to a cultural logic. And she also writes that they must be maintained in repetitive practices and can be changed for this very reason. And from a practice theoretical and performance theoretical perspective, she speaks of doing or undoing emotions. So in my research, I particularly ask how does this doing or undoing emotions or mononormativity take place in polyamorous settings, which new feeling rules, perceptions of love, intimate relationships, and emotional practices emerge and are negotiated between polyamorous couples, groups, and communities, and what meanings do the participants ascribe to emotional work in relation to their own biographical, poly feeling, becoming poly, and being poly, and their everyday relationships. In order to approach these questions, I do ethnographic fieldwork. I conduct participant observations at local and online poly meetups in 3 different German cities. I do group discussions and one-on-one qualitative interviews with polyamorous people, and also have emotion diaries filled out. So the field and sample of my research is as follows. As my participants, I consider polyamorous feeling and or living people as a self-designation. I say feeling and or living because you can be poly without having multiple relationships. They see themselves often as a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. They speak of coming outs, outings, and they also suffer discrimination. My participants are between 20 and 87 years old, so it's not a trend. We're actually just like creating an environment where people feel like safe enough to come out and talk about it, like who they love, how many they love, and how they love. My participants are of all sexual orientations, of all genders, mostly from bigger cities, 2 from the countryside, and mostly academic teachers, IT or biochemistry, don't ask me about that. And yeah, they're also doing a lot of deconstruction work in other fields like deconstructing patriarchy, heteronormativity, racism, sexism, colonialism, classism, ableism, and so on. And in the field is also all about consent and non-violent communication, which also made the field research really pleasant. So my preliminary results. First, in general, I think that's really important to say because of the first keynote we heard this morning, people are happy or even happier than before. They also suffer, but their suffering comes from general relationship problems that can occur in every kind of relationship and in social or because of social stigmatization and discrimination. They also feel liberated. And yeah, what's also really important to say, it's not about compulsory polyamory, but rather showing a spectrum of relationship types so that everyone can choose according to their own needs and like true self, and especially unlearning contingent norms in order to even have the emotional freedom to choose in the first place. So the emotional practices and emotion management I discovered so far. So yeah, what might be a little bit surprising because there's often that stereotype that like people would be like, oh, I just do whatever I want and it's your responsibility to feel okay with it. It's not like that at all. So there are a lot of practices of feeling emotionally safe and secure, but also like giving the other person or the other partners the feeling of emotionally safety. And yeah, that could be, for example, getting to know the other partners or not getting to know them at all, and also focusing on individuality in terms of like the relationship, but also every partner, and therefore seeing every partner in relationship as irreplaceable, which also gives the feeling of yeah, safety and secureness. Also practices of feeling connected, such as having sex, looking into eyes, holding hands, talking openly about recent experiences with other partners or other people, but also like having breaks between seeing different partners and me time to like getting back to yourself and then be open for the next person. And also practices of reflection, self-reflection and questioning, such as writing diary, talking to friends, going to poly meetups and discussing ideas, just sitting by themselves, thinking about stuff, reading feminist blogs, reading books together as partners and discuss their ideas. And their perceptions of love and intimate relationships. So in polyamorous settings, relationships are seen as a state of feeling emotionally connected. That's not new, we already heard of that. Yeah, but other factors such as companionship, sexuality, shared values, shared hobbies, shared life goals, parenthood, living together, shared everyday life can be added, but just can be easily left out. And love doesn't need the same reciprocation or label. I think that's also really interesting. They see love as not comparable. Every love and relationship is different and unique, and no human being can fulfill all needs. But they also feel liberated from the urge to fulfill all needs of their partners. Yeah, they talk a lot about commitment and building the relationship for the long term. That's also really important to them. And fidelity also yeah, plays a big role, but more in the way of loyalty, to not abandon the person and to take care of them. Yeah, polyamory is also in distinction to some sexual scenes because of, yeah, that still narrative that like, oh, love is so cool and fine, sex, boohoo, shame. So yeah, but there's also like a big sex positive movement in the community. And most relationships are really need orientated. So it's all about what do I want, what does the other person want, and how can we come together and make all of us happy. And emotion work is seen as a valued part of relationship work. And yeah, like a tool that is not just a necessity when it comes to problems, but like an everyday practice. And poly relationships are also seen as a space and tool for self-development and personal growth, because yeah, you can see yourself from the angle and perspective of different people that are really close to you. So thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to questions.